and welcome to my presentation today on mitigating test anxiety. So, some background information on test anxiety. What even is it? It is anxiety that someone experiences in anticipation of an exam, especially when there is pressure on this exam and on the student to be successful. Now, test anxiety, the interesting thing about it is that it manifests itself in 3 different ways: in the physical realm, the emotional realm, and the cognitive realm. And we're going to be jumping into all 3 of those now. So some physical symptoms of test anxiety include having a headache, having nausea, sweating excessively, shortness of breath and respiring very quickly in very choppy manners, having a rapidly beating heart, being lightheaded, feeling faint. Test anxiety can also be the cause of panic attacks. Some emotional symptoms include feelings of stress, fear, helplessness, being disappointed in yourself, having negative thoughts in which you ruminate about previously performing poorly on a test, the consequences of failure on the test, especially considering that there is this pressure to succeed. Perhaps feelings of being inadequate, feelings of, your mind going blank. That's an emotional symptom of test anxiety. Having very racing, rapidly moving thoughts. And the third domain that test anxiety manifests itself is in the cognitive realm. And that could be difficulty concentrating, negative thinking like we just mentioned in the emotional symptoms, this comparison of myself to others and thinking that I'm going to be inadequate in comparison to them. So these are various ways in which test anxiety manifests. Some additional background information about where does test anxiety come from and what are the actual effects of test anxiety. One really notable source of test anxiety is perfectionism. So this fear of making mistakes or not performing perfectly. Test anxiety also comes from a student being aware of the high stakes of an exam and really, recognizing the importance of this exam. That creates a lot of pressure. And a third source of test anxiety is if a student has a prior test-taking track record that has been, poor or not that great. That can really get into a student's head. What are some of the negative effects of test anxiety? So first and foremost, in phases of immense stress, the body releases the fight or flight hormone, which is released in times of danger, times of stress, times of pressure, and in times of test anxiety. And as part of the fight or flight hormone being released, our body has these physical manifestations of sweat, clammy hands, rapidly beating heart, high blood pressure, all of those things, and, high cortisol levels, and the physical ramifications of all of those symptoms is really deteriorating on our body and is just really not healthy. So that's one of the big negative consequences. Another negative effect of test anxiety is having this inescapable cycle of negative thoughts that just amplifies the anxiety. You can't get these thoughts to stop racing, and that just makes the student even more anxious, more fight or flight hormones are released, and it's just a really negative spiral that results. And finally, a third effect of test anxiety is the self-fulfilling prophecy in which thoughts affect feelings, affect behavior. So having negative thoughts in which a student is not confident, in which a student feels inadequate, in which a student feels helpless, those are going to lead to bad, disparaging, discouraging feelings that manifest in behavior in which the student actually ends up validating their fear of doing poorly on the exam, in which they actually do poorly on the exams. And this just goes to show how the self-fulfilling prophecy can actually be really dangerous for students. And final piece of this presentation that we're going to get into is best practices to mitigate test anxiety. My favorite is relaxation exercises. So We've talked about how test anxiety manifests in the physical realm, the cognitive realm, the emotional realm, and really contributes to these feelings of just, being stressed, being wound up, being, having your heart beating super fast, being sweaty, and just, being really tight and wired. And so what's going to be really important in terms of just relaxing students' bodies is, one, deep breathing, leading students in exercises of deep inhales and deep exhales, prior to them taking the test is going to help calm them down and get them into a more sound, confident, collected mindset. Students being able to, prior to taking their test, get out some of that anxious energy via doodling. This might be more helpful to some of the more artistically inclined students, but nevertheless, seeing color and drawing, that can really help to get students' mind off of their test anxiety. Another thing that is an important exercise to lead students in prior to them taking their test, to get them feeling relaxed, to get them feeling at peace, is to really have them focus on utilizing their 5 senses. And so teachers can pass out small little trinkets like rocks, stones, fidget toys, or something like that, and have students really talk about, what is it that they see? What is it that the toy sounds like? What is it that it feels like? What do they smell? This can, again, have students detract their attention from the test anxiety and that negative spiral of thoughts and move it to something more positive. Stretching is another relaxation technique that can really get the body loose, get the body calm. Stretching, yoga, and can really help center the student in a more positive headspace. Another great technique to help mitigate test anxiety is reframing techniques. And this really has to do with that cognitive and emotional realm that test anxiety affects. And so one of my favorite reframing techniques is to challenge the negative thoughts. Having students ask themselves when they're suffering from test anxiety is there any evidence contrary to my thought? If they're feeling helpless and feeling like they are going to not do well, having them think about all the reasons that they are going to do well because they're prepared, because they've studied, that's going to help them really jump ship from that negative mindset to that positive mindset. Also, having students ask themselves, if I look at this situation positively, how is it different? So if the student is thinking that this test is going to be, really stressful and is going to tank their grade in a particular class or is going to be harmful to them in some way, they can positively reevaluate that situation and say, actually, this test is meant to help me. I want to be a better student. I want to improve. I want to be somebody that grows academically. And this test, however I do on it, is going to be indicative of my areas of strength and the areas that I need to work on. Another reframing technique that I really enjoy is reappraising stress. Stress can be something that we perceive as deteriorating. Stress can be something that we see as a really bad thing. We might appraise stress as something that clouds our judgment, that makes us not think straight, that really affects our body in a negative way. But if we start to have all of these negative spirals about how we are stressed and how us being stressed is a bad thing, that also can have that self-fulfilling prophecy of us performing poorly on the exam. And so instead, having students reappraise their stress in a more positive way and say, you know what, my stress is a good thing. It means that I care. It means that I'm going to be even more focused because I recognize how important this task is in front of me and I have control over my stress and I'm going to utilize it to fuel me to work in my, to work and to give my best. That is going to have more positive results for the student. And last but not least, another reframing technique is for students to practice compassionate self-talk. This can be in, the weeks leading up to the really big exam that they're going to be taking for the district, whether it's a diagnostic, an end of year, a curriculum-based assessment, or something like that, and as well as on the day of the exam, but having students practice telling themselves positive things like, I'm intelligent, I'm capable, I'm hardworking, I deserve a good grade, I will do well, my best is always enough. Those mindsets are going to help the student also put their best foot forward because there's going to be that positive self-fulfilling prophecy of the student believes in themselves, the student is confident, and by way of that, they're going to perform to the best of their ability. And with that, we have finally reached the end of our presentation. Thank you so much for your time in listening today, in being a part of my presentation of my research findings. I really appreciate your attention, your energy, and I am very grateful to have gotten the opportunity to present on this topic. I hope that it was informational. I hope that you found it helpful. And with that, I am going to conclude by saying have a great day and thank you again for tuning in. Bye-bye.